Dear Mon Pa MAGA, you say that Donald Trump loves our troops. So, once again, I want to know why that is. Is it because he received 5 deferments for a fake medical condition from the draft during the Vietnam War? Is it because he demeaned a POW, attacked a Gold Star family, and told a military widow that her deceased husband knew what he had signed up for? Was it the time he downplayed the traumatic head injuries suffered by our troops after a missile attack as not real because they weren't missing hands and limbs? Is it due to all the years he tried to slash benefits for our veterans? The time he said he didn't want to be seen with war-wounded amputees and to keep them forever out of his sight? Or the time he called our fallen heroes of war suckers and losers? Was it the time he skipped an event in France honoring our Marines because it was raining? Is it all the times he called our military leaders dumb and overrated while calling terrorists like the Taliban and Hezbollah very smart? Was it the time he demanded the flags after John McCain's death be returned to full mast, or the time he demanded that a ship bearing his name be blocked from view? Was it when he stole, hid, and lied about our national security secrets, potentially imperiling countless men and women in uniform all over the world? Or was it when he suggested that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff deserved to be executed? Maybe it was when he asked General John Kelly, who lost his son in combat, why anyone would sign up for service, because as far as he saw it, there was nothing in it for them. Perhaps it was hearing him say that as president, he would allow our adversary to attack the same allies this country's greatest generation fought beside and died defending. Or was it when he insulted Nikki Haley's husband for currently serving our country overseas? Was it when he said the Medal of Freedom he gave to his rich donors was much better than the Medal of Honor because the recipients of that honor are in bad shape or dead? Or was it when he insisted on using the sacred shrine that is Arlington National Cemetery, the final resting place for more than 400,000 veterans and their families, as a photo op for his campaign, despite the fact that he wasn't allowed to do so and officials there were attacked by his staff for trying to stop him? Which of those things was it that made you believe he loved our troops? Which one? Because for the life of me, I can't figure it out, and I'd really love to know. Well, this week's guest on the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast is freshman Congresswoman Jasmine Crocket out of Texas. Oh my gosh, I'm the luckiest person alive to have landed this interview. She is amazing. She's a rising star. Her speech at the DNC, if you didn't see it, please go and find it. It is amazing. It will surprise you. It is incredibly emotional, which I didn't see coming. She's a firebrand. She tells it like it is. She gives it right back to the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is very much in keeping with my style. And I loved this conversation. She's an inspiration. She's the future. And I'm so lucky to have gotten to interview her. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation. Okay, enjoy. Welcome to the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast. Congresswoman Jasmine Crocket. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk to you. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well, and I'm so happy to talk to you, but I just want to jump right in because you announced some really big news, and some congratulations are in order today because you're the newly appointed national co-chair. I'm like so excited. Congratulations. It's well
Thank you.
deserved and so exciting.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, this is a historic campaign. And for anyone who had an opportunity to tune into the DNC, they know that the vice president has a special place in my heart. The tears came from a bit from the story, but also just thinking about just our overall relationship and how it's developed since that point. So I'm really excited that they thought enough of me to put me into this position. It's not really a traditional position for a freshman to play. So really excited to bring some of my ideas, hopefully to life.
I mean, speaking of the DNC, I met you very briefly there. I gave you my Tide pen, which hopefully was helpful. I was glad to do it, but the DNC was incredible. I call it like this great big like joy orgy, really. But I was so curious because coming away from it, everyone has their own impressions. And so many people have said to me, Jasmine Crocket, oh my God, she is one to watch. People who really weren't familiar with you yet. I mean, I'm a little more familiar with you because I'm in the weeds on this stuff, but your speech was incredible. Girl, I did not know I was going to cry, and I ugly cried. So, I mean, can you just tell us about your impression of the DNC and sharing that story, an emotional story that made all of us cry?
Yeah, so it was my first DNC. And what a whirlwind it was to have my first DNC and also be speaking there. Putting together that speech was pretty difficult. So on that first day is when no one ran on time, everyone ran over. So I was supposed to have a 5-minute speech, and they had calculated that each minute is about 100 words. And so I was limited to 500 words, but they were like, we need you to make the case of the prosecutor versus the felon, but also we want you to tell this story. And I was like, guys, I don't know how to do this in 100 words. I can do it in 5 minutes, though, because I'm used to the 5-minute constraints. And then so as we went through practicing the speech and things like that, they were like, oh, you've got to slow down. And I was like, I can't slow down. You guys told me 5 minutes. What do you mean? And they were like, it's completely different when you're in the hall. We want to make sure that everyone hears everything. And I was like, this thing is not going to be 5 minutes. But I still thought no longer than maybe 7. And I was constantly reading the story over and over, hopefully getting to the point that I would not get emotional. So I was reading it and practicing. And clearly, I did not do a good enough job because I got emotional anyway. And I'm always emotional when I tell that story. But one of the things that we wanted to do is that the initial polling, when she was announced as the candidate within the first week, it came out and it said that people were really excited about this shift, but that people didn't know her. And so as I initially went out on the campaign trail and sat down with various organizers and things like that, this is a story that I had actually been telling. So when it came time to write the speech, they were like, tell us what you've been doing on the trail. And I'm like, well, you know that this is a completely different candidate. So it looks a little different from when I was campaigning for President Joe Biden. But I tell them this story to hopefully get them to the point that they understand who she is, like the essence of who she is. So they're like, oh, you got to tell the story. And I was like, I don't know about that. Like, it's a very intimate thing. Telling it with my closest friends across the world hadn't really been my idea of something to do. And she had no idea that this story was going to come out, I don't think. Maybe the speechwriter told her. I'm not really sure. But I didn't talk to her before the speech. I had actually been in Taiwan. So, I don't know. But I will say that I was happy to hear stories like yours, that people could really sense my authenticity, which I think has kind of been the hallmark of this first term for me, is that people somehow through a camera, through a computer, through social media, are able to sense that I'm truly authentic in this work.
And that's what comes through 1,000%. And that's why you resonate so much. I mean, that's why you're so powerful. People didn't feel like you were being completely genuine, which you are in every way, shape, and form. I mean, the punching back is genuine. And we love that, especially the alliterative stuff. We love that because it fires us up and it makes us feel like, let's go, we're fighters. But this other side of you, this this side of you that interacted with Kamala in that moment where you were you didn't even know her very well, but she could pick up that you were feeling stressed and unsure. And she read you because you're just this genuine soul. And she met you where you were and said what you needed her to say in that moment and didn't even really know probably that you needed her to say. But how that kind of set you on this trajectory where you were like, I can do this. Like, I'm just going to be myself. I got this. It's that the intersection of all of those things and knowing you and how much of a badass you are. I mean, knowing you in this capacity, it really is really amazing. And I think it's why you really are making such a big difference.
Yeah, I agree. Our story goes beyond the first interaction for sure at this point. And I will say that I never thought that I would count as a mentor of mine, the first and only woman vice president, soon to be president of the United States. Especially, there are those that have had relationships with her, prior to her ascending to this particular position. And that part kind of makes sense to me, because, I think that as women leaders, we are consistently looking for community, because we typically are in spaces that just aren't occupied by too many that are like us. And so it's always helpful to kind of have a sister circle of sorts. But, for those that knew her prior to, that's one thing, right? But once she kind of was in this role, it's like, I don't have time to do anything. And I'm just a low-level member of Congress. I mean, I'm nowhere near the ascension to presidency when you look at kind of like the line. But the fact that she still finds time is just absolutely remarkable. But it also tells me that she really believes in the work that we're doing. She understands that, number one, she can't get anything done by herself. And she also believes and recognizes just the way that has been paved by so many for her. But honestly, she now is the waymaker for so many others. I mean, there has not been another Black female attorney general in the state of California, but obviously we've got Tish James. We have seen some others in the country, but she really probably was the first in the entire country, Black female AG, but there's definitely not been another one in California. She came behind a sorority sister of mine when it came to the Senate, becoming only the second Black woman to enter the U.S. Senate. And then here it was, vice presidency. No other woman, period, had done it. And she is knocking on the door of becoming the first woman president. And, my question to people that are on the outside looking in, or people that are sitting on the fence, is, do you want the type of leader that will reach back and build up other leaders from the potential next generations? Or do you want somebody, this is literally off of policy, like just literally looking at the character of the person, or do you want someone who's constantly tearing somebody down? Whether it's someone who is disabled, or whether it's someone who is from a different cultural background, like, is that who we really want to be in this country? And I, call me crazy, but I think better of our country. I know that we're not perfect. I know that there's a lot that we need to work on, but like, I at least want a good person at the helm when making so many of these important decisions, and honestly, with having access to the nuclear codes.
Right. And that is one of the many distinctions between them. She calls upon our better angels, and he stokes, our deepest, ugliest, emotions and feelings, and that's one of the main differences between them. Like you said, she's a decent, good person who wants good things for the American people, for other people, and he obviously doesn't. He wants only for himself. You talked about that distinction in your incredible speech as well, but in addition to that distinction, you talked about her having a resume and him having a rap sheet. So there are also those huge contrasts between them, where she's the former prosecutor and he's the convicted felon. And I feel like that's a really important message to continue to drive home all the time. Obviously, you highlighted it in your speech so well.
Yeah, it is. And it was definitely a difficult line for me to walk, as someone who's only done criminal defense my entire career. I've never been a prosecutor. I'll say that. So, for me, I've always written legislation that recognize that people sometimes end up in circumstances, sometimes beyond their control, sometimes not necessarily beyond their control, but circumstances. And then some people just are bad people. I mean, that's just the reality. But I've always recognized the humanity in those that have been criminally justice impacted. And so it definitely was a difficult line for me to walk, because I did not want to make it seem like I was beating up on the very community that I've consistently defended and fought for. But, for me, this message was bigger than the people in the room. This message was about making a clear statement to everyone that was watching, which was across the world, and drawing this contrast, and especially calling out the hypocrisy. This was about hypocrisy again for me, right? Because you've got these folk that say we are about law and order, and it's clear that you're not. We've got these folk that say that they are the evangelicals, and it's clear that you're not, right? When we look at these comparisons of like the two, the morality of the two, as well as the criminality of the two. And so it was about doing that. But I do want to be clear that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that she was always the type of prosecutor that we would have wanted. And I specifically named Breonna Taylor, like in her case. We want fair prosecution. We don't want just these overt prosecutors that we've experienced so often that have caused harm to the Black and Brown communities. And I thought that I was the perfect person to credentialize her and to try to be as delicate as possible so as to not come off with a tone that made me seem like I was trying to put down people that were criminally justice impacted. But we know in this country that when it comes to the legislation, the Republicans are the ones that are constantly holding people back for the entirety of their lives. You are limited in your housing options, your job options, your education options. Yet somehow you guys have seen fit to lift this guy up and make him the most powerful person in the world. And again, it's the hypocrisy for me.
And speaking legislatively of legislation, and speaking of, Republicans, you said also you identified the reason that you were feeling disillusioned as a freshman coming into Congress was you saw this chaos with the 17 votes or however many votes it was with McCarthy, and then the oversight committee being this complete, you call them the chaos caucus, which I call them all the time as well, because that's what it is. I know we're all looking at the top of the ticket and we're all looking at, the presidential election, but Congress, we need to get the House back, because you've seen they are not accomplishing anything but chaos. They're blocking, you said the border bill, the farm bill, they're blocking actual legislation, not doing anything for the American people, but sowing a whole bunch of chaos.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And it's unfortunate because the American people deserve better. I think governance should be a bipartisan thing. And I'd even go further. I think that governance should encompass all Americans, whether you are Democrat, Republican, independent. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you will always get exactly what you want out of your government, but you expect them to do basic things like keep the lights on. We're coming up on our budget deadline, September 30th. We got through the fiscal year 2024 budget and we were 6 months late on that. And it was a constant, will we shut down? Will we not shut down? And that type of chaos really does cause problems. I actually was out here in my district yesterday, and there was a government contractor that was very concerned about the budget because it is tough for them to be able to plan for what's going to happen as far as workforce and things like that if they don't know if the money is going to come in, right? And so it just has so many layers to it for everybody that's traveling and frustrated by what travel looks like. We're down about 30% when it comes to our air traffic controllers, which makes it pretty dangerous. But also it's the flights aren't slowing down. The airlines want to make their money. But the last time that we had a shutdown, and the thing that got it back on track was that air traffic control actually said, well, we're out. Well, that stops everything. That stops commerce. That stops business travels. That stops leisure travel. It stops everything. So people need to understand, even if you don't work specifically for the federal government, shutdowns are a really big thing and they affect all of us. And so having literally the people that just can't be adults and do things like make sure that we're not going to panic every 2 seconds around a shutdown is a problem. Not being able to do the farm bill, which sounds like it's only for the farmers, and that's not the truth, because all of us need to eat. So it's for all of us. Not being able to get through the farm bill, which is only once every 5 years. We're now on year 6. It's a problem. It's a problem for rural America overall, because our farmers are not able to make plans for how they're going to plant, which means that we can't necessarily have what we need in the grocery stores, which potentially causes an increase in the cost of groceries. And then also just, SNAP benefits comes out of the farm bill. And, rural America actually uses more SNAP than urban America. So it's a big deal for all of us. And not being able to do the basics is really frustrating, no matter really who you are, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, urbanite, or someone in rural America.
Right. We want government to work for us. Put our head, we don't want to pay attention to all the other palace intrigue. We want the government to work for us. Last thing, you stressed this. I think it's so important. We're still the underdogs in this fight, not relenting, not giving up. I love that. Like, can you talk about that for just like 1 minute?
Yeah, no, we are the underdogs. I don't want people to relax and see the excitement or hear the polls and think that this is in the bag, because the only poll that matters is the poll on election day. So we've got to get to those polls. And honestly, I've been telling everybody we've got to push ourselves. This can't just be, oh, yeah, I'm going to show up and vote. It's a matter of you got to show up and vote. You got to tell your friends. You got to tell your neighbors. You got to tell your family members. You got to tell your sorority sisters and brothers. Like, everybody needs to be in this. And then I've even been telling people, you know what, stretch yourself. Talk to someone that you would never talk to, whether it's the Uber driver about politics, whether it's, you're an older generation person talking to a very young person. Like, talk to someone you would never talk to and explain to them why this election matters, whether it's democracy or whether it's making sure the middle class can have access to housing as we are struggling with housing cost and with the cost of rent. Like, tell them that this is the team that is fighting for our education and making sure that it's not privatized at the cost of our tax dollars. Tell them to Google Project 2025 and whatever it is that is the most important thing to them, and see if they like what it has to say about it. So listen, we can't take anything for granted. We rested and they took Roe. We rested and they took affirmative action. We rested and they've started to chip away at LGBTQIA rights. This cannot just be a matter of going in and voting once every 4 years, but we've got to show up this time, and we've got to vote up and down the ballot. It's not good enough to send her into the White House. We've got to send her into the White House and have a functioning House and a functioning Senate. And to be perfectly honest, right now, our states are tearing us apart. Texas wants to institute the death penalty for those that are seeking abortions come January. It is important that we vote all the way down the ticket.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And we can, like Tim Walz says, we can sleep when we're dead. No resting right now. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Crockett. I mean, such a fangirl. You are amazing. I know people love you all over this country and all over this world. Thank you again for your time. This concludes this episode of the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast. Thank you again to my guest, Representative Jasmine Crockett. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much, Congresswoman.
Thanks, Jojo.